out today. It's middle of April and it's pretty horrible and miserable outside, so glad to be inside doing some work today on this Piper Seneca 2, doing a little bit of engine work, and we just finished the pressure decay test on the combustion heater for the aircraft. But our work today has kind of come to an end due to a lack of parts, so I thought I'd take this opportunity to talk to you about spark plugs, specifically spark plug fouling. Can't think of too many things that are going to spoil your nice weekend lunch with friends in the airplane more than trying to start the airplane in late afternoon on a Sunday and having a big nasty mag drop just before you take off and not being able to fly home. Hopefully that's only as serious as a fouled plug, and with a little bit of know-how and the right tools you'll be able to get that corrected. Hopefully you've taken a look at our video on what tools to carry in the airplane, and if you have, you'll have everything that you need to fix this problem, and hopefully you've got a spare spark plug. You can clean a fouled spark plug, but if you've got a spare spark plug, it's much quicker to just swap it out once you've found that fouled plug. So when we're doing our run-up, we'll be able to get a little bit of information. Obviously we know that the engine is running poorly on one magneto and it's giving us that nasty drop that you're not happy with, and we want to make note of what ignition source that's happening on. If we have a standard ignition key in a 172 or a Cherokee, we normally have sort of an off, left, right, both, and start position. So if you're getting the mag drop on the right position, that means the engine's running on the right mag and the drop is on the right mag, and therefore we've got a fouled plug that's connected to the right magneto, assuming that your ignition is hooked up correctly to the grounds on the magnetos. I have seen them switched before, but assuming that's correct, that's telling us what's going on. If you have something like a Super Cub with toggle switches, when you switch a toggle switch off, you're grounding that magneto. So you have a left and a right magneto toggle switch. When you switch the left toggle switch off, you've grounded that mag and you're running on the right. So just be careful about diagnosing that way. Now, if we have a full EGT CHT system, or even just a full EGT system like this engine does, we have CHTs all across the front here, that will allow us to see when the engine's running poorly on the one ignition source. We'll be able to see from the engine monitor in the cockpit which cylinder isn't making any temperatures, and as long as it's hooked up correctly, that'll tell us exactly which cylinder is not running properly, and for our case, most likely has that fouled spark plug. Now, fouled spark plugs are more likely to occur on bottom cylinders. This is because they are obviously more likely to fill up with lead and oil just simply by their position and gravity and the way all that works. So normally, not always, but normally the lower cylinder, the lower spark plugs are the ones that are going to get fouled. So we've done our run-up. If we've got our nice EGT set up, we've determined what cylinder is bad. Obviously we need to know how the numbering system works on the engine so that we can then identify which one it is. If we don't have that system, the EGT setup, obviously we just know, okay, well, when we're only running on the right magneto, for our purposes today, just as a demonstration, it's running poorly. Well, what we want to do is use that information. When we shut the airplane down and secure it, we want to come out. Obviously we're going to have to remove the cowling, and depending on your airplane, having some familiarity with that will be very useful. Normally you only need some basic tools, and if you're lucky enough to fly a Musketeer or a Cherokee, you just undo a couple of clasps and you've got wonderful access to the airplane. If you've got a B model Mooney, you're going to have to undo about 100 screws and you're going to need a lot of patience. So it just depends on the aircraft that you've got. So once you've removed all of that, you're going to want to take a look at the harness on the aircraft and decide where your likely culprit is, and go from there. So I'll just bring you around to the back of the engine. Okay, so we can see our two magnetos. We've got our left mag and our right mag here. And for our demonstration purposes, we were saying that the right magneto was going to be running poorly. And if I followed the harnesses around, what I would learn is that the right magneto is driving the lower plugs on the left side of the engine and the upper plugs on the right side of the engine. Now, that's pretty common. to have a magneto run lower plugs on one side and upper on the other, and the main purpose for that is so that you don't have the magneto running all the lower plugs, and if they're the ones most likely to foul, if you lose the other magneto, you end up with one that's maybe already got a bunch of fouled plugs on it. That's not always the case. Some engine installations do have one magneto running top and one magneto running bottom plugs. So just knowing for our demonstration that that right magneto was running poorly and that right magneto runs the lower plugs on this side of the engine, we would likely start with these three here until we find a fouled plug. Now, again, with our EGT-CHT setup in here, we'd probably be able to narrow that down to exactly what cylinders it is. Obviously, you can look up in the maintenance manual for the airplane cylinder numbers, and most of the time the cylinder numbers are stamped on the crankcase of the engine as well. Sometimes that can be hard to see with the baffling. Lycoming and Continental use different numbering systems. They're basically backwards to each other for most of their engines, but there are a few engines that don't follow their standard numbering system. A Continental engine, the number one cylinder is is at the back on the right side of the engine, and number two is across from it. So you'd have 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, and 6. If this was a Lycoming engine, number one would be at the front with number two across from it, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. And that's probably the case for 90% of the time plus, probably 98% of the time. But there are a few engines that don't follow that. An easy way to remember it that a friend at trade school came up with, which I thought was very clever, is that Continental has got an L at the end of Continental, and an L looks like a 1, so the number one cylinder is at the back of the engine. And Lycoming is spelt with an L at the front, and an L again looks like a 1, and the number one cylinder on a Lycoming is at the front of the engine. Okay, once you've opened up your cowlings and you've got your tools out that you need, you're obviously going to have to get that plug out of there. So we'll take a little bit of a look at how that's done. Now, as I said, we would remove a lower plug for today's example because that's the most likely culprit that we would have for our situation. But I think for ease of visibility, I'm just going to demonstrate removing an upper plug because you'll have, it'll be much easier for you to see. The light's much better, the angle is much better, and I'll be able to demonstrate much better how to remove that spark plug at the top of the cylinder. Once we've got our cowlings all out of the way and removed and secured so they don't blow away in the wind out in the ramp, and we got our tools out and we're looking for our spark plug. Now, as I said earlier, I'm going to demonstrate the removal and installation on a top plug just because it's much brighter and it's much clearer and easier for you to see. But the likelihood is for a fouled plug, it's probably, not always, but probably going to be a lower plug. So for this type of plug here, this is an all-weather plug, we're going to need a 7/16 and a 7/8 wrench to get the cap off. If you have standard plug cap, you're going to need a 7/16 and a 3/4 inch. We're just going to hold the center with the 7/16 of the high tension line, and that's just to stop it from being twisted and damaged as we undo the cap. So, just going to break it free. They're not very tight. Start off with our 7/16, and we're just using this to hold the center of the wire there so that we don't twist it as we're undoing it. So we just want to hold with that one, and then we're just going to break it free. It won't be very tight. I don't want that to twist, so we'll hold that, and we can undo that by hand. Okay, then we're going to get our ratchet. So we want a 7/8 deep ratchet. I've got a little extension, 7/8 socket and a extension, and then our ratchet. Lock that in there. There we go. Now, don't drop the spark plug, as you can damage them. If you do drop one, don't put it back in, put a replacement in. Okay, so now we've got it removed. We'd be looking in the center here for something bridging the electrode, like a piece of lead, or for this to be completely oil-soaked. If that's what we found, hopefully we have a spare spark plug, so we're just going to swap them, install it into the engine, put the cap back on, put the cowls on, do our run-up. As long as everything checks out properly, we're good to go. If we pull a plug out and it looks like this, which is perfect and clean, because I've just cleaned it and re-gapped it and everything, it's not even run since we've done that, this wouldn't be a fouled plug, so if that's what we're suspecting, we'd keep looking across the rest of the cylinders. Now, this cylinder had a CHT ring probe underneath, and we've got to be careful not to damage that. If you don't have one of those, you will have a standard crush gasket, copper crush gasket on the spark plug. Be careful when you remove the plug not to drop the crush gasket down into the fins or between the cylinders, because, well, that's just going to ruin your day and you're going to have a really hard time fishing it out. So careful not to drop that. All right, once we're happy, once we've swapped our plug, we can go ahead and install. I'm going to have to hold on to the this to stop it spinning and damaging that CHT. Of course, it's going to fight me a little bit. There we are. Just have to have your tongue held in the correct direction. All right. So, calibrated elbow here. Paid attention to how hard it was to undo, or if you can get some practice at doing them up, that's a really great help. So, there we go. That should be about our 30 foot-pounds of torque, specified in the M0 maintenance manual. I have a torque wrench with me, so we will double check it with the torque wrench. Perfect. And we'll unwind that torque wrench so that it doesn't stretch the spring. And then we will install the cap. All right, so just feed that in there. Bring that over. Again, hold the center of the high tension line so that we don't twist and damage it. And there we have about a 1/16 of a turn. That's all good to go. Okay, so once we've got that all back and installed and done back up and torqued, we would reinstall our cowls, we'd do our run-up, and we'd make sure that we've got an acceptable mag drop. And if everything is good, then we're good to go. And obviously, if we still have a problem, we don't want to be taking off with the airplane not working properly. If you have an opportunity to go over this with your aircraft mechanic and get a little bit of experience with it ahead of time, that'll obviously really help your confidence in troubleshooting this and making sure you're going about things the correct way. And it could really, save you from some inconvenience at some point. So I hope it's been helpful for you, and hope you continue learning lots about your airplane. Once again, torque specifications for the Continental are M0 maintenance manual, and they want 25 to 30 foot-pounds. For the Lycoming, Service Instruction 1042 Alpha Echo is one source that provides information for you. Lycoming wants 35 foot-pounds of torque on the plug, and then they give you a torque specification for the two different cap styles. This is the all-weather, so this is a 3/4 by 20 thread, and the standard is a 5/8 by 24 thread. And they want 80 to 90 inch-pounds for the standard, and I believe it's 90 to 110 for the all-weather. And I'll put the details in the bottom of the video. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed the video, and happy tailwinds.